This video will discuss the balance between nature versus nurture. By the end of the video, you should have an idea of whether scientists think one is more important than the other. Is nature more important than nurture, or vice versa? So what is nurture versus nature? You've probably heard of this in another psychology class. Nurture is the experience, things that are happening in the environment surrounding us. Nature is our biology, our genetics, what we're born with, what's innate. So the question is, which is more important? And for a really long time, people either belonged to one camp or another. They either believed that nurture was more important or nature was more important. Nowadays, most scientists understand that both genes and the environment interact to shape our human behavior, that it's not one or the other, that genes and the environment are just as important and they interact with each other. The environment can influence our genes, and the genes can influence the environment which we find ourselves in. So this is an example from the textbook. I normally like to find examples that are different, but I really like this one, kind of a personal example to me. And here we have sighted individuals on the right here, and individuals without sight on the left. At least I think that's the way it is. And they're relatives, so these people are related, so on and so forth. Now, what this picture is showing you is that even though these individuals can't see these facial expressions, they still have very similar facial expressions. So something that you don't often think of as being genetic or having a genetic influence must have a genetic influence, because they couldn't have seen these expressions to mimic them. I like this example because in my family, we have what we call the Brendan look. So one of my brother's sons, he has this look that he gives every once in a while, and it's been since he was a baby. And we always called it the Brendan look. And my mom one day said that she really believes that it's this look that her cousin, which is also our cousin, but very far removed, that one of her cousins used to do when she was a child. And so my nephew Brendan has never met this cousin. I've only met this cousin a handful of times when I was very young. So he couldn't have learned to do that look from observing her, again suggesting it's genetic. And then two out of my 3 kids, Tyler and Camille, they both have this Brendan look. And yeah, when we go up there and we spend time with them a few times a year, I don't think it's probably enough interaction for them to actually learn that look through an environmental interaction, suggesting that, again, this facial expression has some sort of genetic underpinning. So sometimes it's hard to tell something that seems like it would be something we would learn in the environment is really caused by genetics. So here's another example I want to bring up. There's this documentary that came out a few years ago called 3 Identical Strangers. And so if you haven't seen it, I believe it's streaming for free on various services now. And it's a really good documentary. It kind of goes through this nature versus nurture story, but also kind of some detective work. And it's a very interesting story, although there are some components missing to it. And basically, it's a story of identical triplets who were separated at birth. And the way they found each other was that one of the brothers, named Robert, was walking through the halls of community college and being called the other one's names. And so he started this community college, and everyone's calling him Eddie. Finally, one of Eddie's friends came up to him and said, you have to meet this guy. You look exactly like him. And sure enough, they were identical. So they went on some talk shows, did the talk show circuit, and at some point during that talk show circuit, a third person called the newsroom and said, I think they might actually be triplets. And sure enough, they were. So some of the things that they shared in common were amazing. So they all smoked Marlboro cigarettes, they all liked older women, they all wrestled in high school, and they all had some mental health issues in high school. So the story gets more interesting when they learned that not only were they separated at birth, and that their adoptive parents did not know about it, but they were actually part of an experiment that they were never told about. So Peter Neubauer, who's a psychiatrist, decided to separate twins and triplets at birth. They did have the approval of their biological parents, at least the biological mother. And not only did they separate them and not tell them they were separated, but they put them into homes that had different socioeconomic standings. So, and I don't know which one went to which, but say one triplet went to a low SES family, one went to a middle-income family, and one went to a high SES family. And I'm not going to spoil the documentary much more for you, but one of the women who kind of had a brief little interview during the documentary said that researchers really seemed to be thinking that they were seeing much more of a genetic influence than they thought. They started out the experiment hypothesizing that the environment would really influence the development of the child, and what they were seeing was it really seemed to have more genetic underpinning. Of course, we won't know because that research has been sealed in a basement until like 2065 or something like that. But again, it's just an interesting story of like, how much does nature play a role? And here they have, identical DNA versus how much did the environment play a role?